Hello everyone, my name's Riwin and today we are finally discussing The Crawl. Now the new season's out, we're going to be discussing week by week all the new episodes, so it only makes sense to start with episode 1 today. So, initial thoughts on the episode. It was really enjoyable the first time round. I do think it's probably one of the episodes with the least rewatchability, purely because it's a lot of plot dump all in one go. I don't think it was necessarily done badly, and I also don't think it was necessarily unnecessary to do so, but I do think there was a lot of information crammed into a very small space, and it felt a lot like just getting a lot. But there was some really great foreshadowing, which we'll discuss, and I think overall it was a really good episode, so let's go. So, first 5 minutes was, we already discussed this one in detail, actually. I will link it here, but for the first 5 minutes, I do think what is most interesting here is probably what has Vecna done. It's a great start to the series because immediately it's showing us that Will is the protagonist this season, and also likely gives an explanation why in episode 4 Sorcerer he has his powers. Whatever Vecna has done here and is doing to these children, he has done to Will first. Now, what is my personal opinion on that? I think that he's probably trying to create children with powers. I think that's where we're going with this, because all the children are going through the same things, and it was really weird in Sorcerer for Vecna to walk in and out. So I think that we are establishing that Will Byers has powers, and that we're going to see how they manifest, but also that it's not also Will's control. Especially as it goes in, like the plan is starting because of Will specifically, not the other kidnappings. That means that something is special about Will, and we are meant to very much pay attention to that, and that makes me worried because Will using his powers may be in the favor. Now, I will say as well, I told you so, not to brag, but I did get a lot of things right about this, but one thing that really tipped me off to Will having powers was his jump between the trees, because he didn't like a jump like that. He jumped straight forward. It was a very supernatural jump, like something, I don't know if he necessarily had powers there, but something was already like quite special about him. I think that's probably what Vecna noticed. So, anyway, obviously we get into the season, and it's been a year and a half between this season and the previous seasons, which is insane work, genuinely insane work. So, obviously it's due to filming, strikes and stuff, but it is also just because, you know, it makes sense in the plot, I believe. It's really interesting to see the Wheelers and the Byers living together too, because that really gives us a new perspective on how like cramped and like stressed this season's going to be. It is a brilliant introduction to how it's going to work. We do have the couples that I suspect to be canon next to each other as well. We have Jonathan and Nancy together, and then we also have Will and Mike sitting next to each other, which is immediately a green flag. This could easily be evidence later on as to which couples are going to be canon for definite. It was a really great start to the series because obviously we had the Stranger Things main tune coming in. It really brought us back into the universe because, you know, it has been years between the seasons. I personally watched it in August, but a lot of people even watching my videos, like, hello you people, have waited for years and years. So they really needed to ease everyone back into the universe, and I think that was done really, really well. What is also interesting to me though is there is this really sweet brotherhood back between Jonathan and Will. Like, they are comfortable enough to argue with each other and to whinge at each other, sorry. And what is really fascinating to me is the fact that I forgot what is fascinating to me. What was fascinating to me as well is this highlighted that Will is being sassy again. He's being happy. He's smiling a lot this season. Something is very special about Will this time, and we're being shown straight from the bat that he's acting that way. We also get a bit of foreshadowing that something is about to go wrong because, again, the house is very cramped and the tension is very, very high. We have Will and Mike, Holly all cycling to school together. That was really cute. I really loved that. I thought it was just a really sweet addition, and I think it really emphasizes a connection between the Wheelers and the Byers. There's that really strong connection between them. Even if it has obviously gotten weaker because of the tension between the families, it's just adorable. Something that felt a little bit weird. So obviously we go into Robin and Steve going onto the radio station, and they're talking about stuff going on in Hawkins. Something that really intrigued me was the fact that there was medical checkups going on. Like, that could just be because the dust might have negative effects on them, but also I think they are watching out for something. Like, something is off. I think the military is looking for something that we don't fully understand as the audience yet, but I'm very intrigued to see what that is. I love seeing the Steve and Robin dynamic come back. That was brilliant. I loved seeing them just have that high energy back together because I love them as a duo, even if Steve's character got kind of assassinated this season so far. I do think they were really sweet together. So, then we have Dustin. Oh, Dustin, my Dustin. He has changed a lot this season. He's obviously grieving. Although, I will be honest, I did feel slightly frustrated sometimes with his character. Not in like in a good way. Like, he's written well. I was beginning to be a bit frustrated because obviously it's clear he's grieving still. But there's also the frustration that his friends around him in the show feel, the audience feels. Because that's what I was feeling. I was kind of like, we have priorities here, dude. I get it. But, you know, and you can also just admit that you were wrong. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to be fighting for Hellfire Club, but I do think, one, the priority is, like, you can avenge Eddie in different ways. Eddie was never about, like, starting fights. He was always about baiting people, but he was never about going actually at people and fighting people. So I don't think it's the true spirit of Eddie that he's trying to spread around. Yeah, that was the only thing. But I am interested to see how Steve and Dustin are going to make up as well, because obviously everyone has really high tension with Dustin. Something is going to click in his head very, very soon that if he keeps being angry and grumpy with the people around him, he's going to lose them too. And I'm very, very afraid that the person he's going to lose to trigger this realization is Jonathan. You guys who have watched my videos know I have predicted Jonathan dying a lot, and a lot of my predictions, even down to the camera shot of Will having powers, has been correct so far, and that actually concerns me because... But we'll get more into that later. So, obviously we have a bit of Elle's powers growing, but that wasn't the only thing I took from this. It was definitely a lot more about her growing as a character. It felt like as a person she's growing more because she's always been locked down to some very, very small traits. She has been the girl with the powers, she has been Hopper's daughter, and she's been Mike's girlfriend, but it's very hard to find where Jane and Elle is. Like, specifically her. Because that's one of the reasons I've discussed a lot of why I want Byler, because I think that she's very heavily restricted by being Mike's boyfriend a lot of the time. Like, she wants to experience teenage love, but she's also being very mistreated in the way she is being treated. But what I do love is seeing her grow. She's becoming significantly more stronger. She's become more confident in what she's doing, and I'm so excited to see that. I am all here for Elle to be strong and powerful, and I'm definitely really here to see the Wonder Twins, which is Will and Elle, now fighting together, which is probably inevitable. Love this video. Oh, Steve and Jonathan competing. This side plot really pisses me off, because having Steve and Jonathan constantly fighting over Nancy messes up so many things. Not only does it mess up their own character development, it also messes with Nancy's a bit as well. And you could see that because she's becoming frustrated, the actual character, with what she has to deal with, and she's becoming angry, but she's got no one to support her. It really limits the characters. I think that this love triangle is continuing. There's absolutely no reason to have the love triangle continuing. There is so much areas you could go with Jonathan, and there are so many areas you can go with Steve, and there are so many areas you can go with Nancy. But when you're trying to force them into these small boxes, like Nancy less so, but Steve and Jonathan, they don't feel like themselves at all. Like, I get Steve is stressed because of obviously Dustin's upset as well, but I do think that it's a big injustice to the characters what is currently happening. Like, it was kind of funny them racing up the radio tower. It was funny, but it's also frustrating. I know a lot of people who are like considering turning off the show or skipping their segments because it's not enjoyable to watch the same two guys fight for the same girl for 5 seasons. Something like Byler and versus Malevolent is so much more complicated because there's so much love there, and there's also so much, like I said it before, toxicness between Malevolent. There is so much more depth to that relationship than Steve and Nancy is just they dated for a bit and then didn't want to date anymore. Steve Harrington had so much development in season 3 to float I can't speak today. So to throw it all away in the way they did is very frustrating and kind of upsetting, if I'm being honest. So I really do hope we're going to get this fixed in future, because I don't want to see this keep happening. Anyway. So we do actually get an early hint about the wedding. One thing that I really do like about this episode and future episodes is the series has gotten very good at foreshadowing. So when Murray hands over the music, he says, "Oh, I know you're not into jazz, but you'll find this one very engaging." Now, I didn't catch that the first time I watched it, but you will find throughout the series there are a significant amount of details that you can understand later. Even Robin's speech that's quite controversial in the Byler community at some point, I believe is actually Byler evidence over Mylevin evidence, because when you look at the later context as opposed to the context you currently have now, it means something entirely different. And I think there was just a lot of hints here going on, a lot of just little snippets of things that could happen, that probably will happen. I even just Will having that moment with his spinning head, that was really interesting, because you could kind of guess it, but not. It was very, it's the mystery of season 1 that I particularly loved. It really starts to build in that sense of mystery and what's going on, as opposed to just straight up horror and gore constantly, which I don't think any series particularly was, but I do feel like we definitely lost that mystery of season 1 that has now come back in full force now. I did really love the way that the communication with the radio station went about the crawl mission. I think it's so clever, and I do think it's foreshadowing that the radio station is going to have a much bigger role this season. Not only is it good at communicating, we also see the Mind Flayer climbing up it in the trailer, so combined with the fact that there's a weapon that works against 11 that is sound, I think it's very clear what's going to happen here. We're going to take out the Mind Flayer using that radio tower, and this is the first way to kind of ease us into thinking about it. The radio tower has come in helpful multiple times, and every time we think, oh, that's a really cool use, that's great, oh, that's another really cool use, that must be it, oh, that's another really cool use, and we are going to get this radio station coming back and back and back. It's such a big thing for the plot, and it explains why we have so much merch for it as well. Personally, I think it's just a really cool motive and reference to the 70s as well. I think it's definitely very realistic to the 70s, I feel like. Especially, I loved seeing Steve make all those sounds. That was so fun. I genuinely really enjoyed that. We did have the scene with Dustin and the snake, and that kind of frustrated me as well, because it's one thing standing up for yourself, but attacking them like this and provoking the fight that happened, because he didn't deserve to get beaten up, and it shouldn't have happened, but he did also provoke them. That's not victim blaming, by the way. That is saying it's just, he needed to lay his head low. This wasn't the time to be starting fights. Even if he didn't technically start them, it was the time to lay low, because on Eddie, to get revenge for Eddie, you kind of have to settle down. But I do also understand where Dustin is coming from. I understand the frustration. I understand missing the core values, but I also think he's also missing his own core values. But we would definitely see that come back in full force, 100%. I don't think it's completely off the table yet. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, we then have the whole party together, the main four, and I just honestly thought that was really sweet. There's something I missed from the earlier seasons, is the main four. It feels like they were always split up, to the point that when Will and Mike had their famous rain fight, one of the things Will said is, "Where is Dustin? You don't know where he is. You genuinely have no idea where he's gone." So I think to bring back the core party and have them so sweet together, even having Dustin happy for a moment when I think it was Lucas jumping off the bench, that was... it was so sweet, and it really shows the divide that's going on with Will at the moment and how he feels, as opposed to, I think, what's going to happen more later, is that he feels this divide, that he's not with everyone. Something is different about him. It's interesting, the line he's walking in this episode and in the future, because he's definitely becoming more into himself, but he also still feels this disconnect, because he is still disconnected from everyone in a way that's... it's just unlike anyone. You know, even Elle, who has powers, can't relate to these kind of powers, can't even... And when Will doesn't know what's going on as well, it's interesting. And I definitely think there is going to be some foreshadowing there. But I did really love the transition to Mr. Whatsit as well. So creepy. He was so amazingly set up in this episode. You guys will hear me yap a lot about the Mr. Whatsit reveal, but he was so cool. I did heavily suspect this was Vecna, but I feel like everyone watching it probably did, because warning about them was an easy way to get to them. But I think the way they revealed him was so creepy. be so creepy. And then to have it later on, like, make you question it as well, is be like, like, is he good? Is he actually warning Holly, or is he twisting the words? And seeing the teacher being so creeped out as well, that really unnerves, because, you know, teachers are meant to be unbiased and see and understand. But yeah, we did also get Byler segments for this. I forgot to mention, I loved it's very crumbs. It's absolute crumbs. But I loved Mike coming over to check on Will and being the one that kept putting his hand on Will, being like, "Are you okay?" Because obviously all of them were checking on him, but Mike was the one who put his hand on Will, and then when they were walking away, also put his hand on Will again. I just realized my camera is glitching, so I'm so sorry if this video comes out a bit glitchy. I think having the lab be revealed in that upside down as well was really cool, and that tentacle very much intrigued me, especially in the fact that it seems to work in a different way to the Mind Flayer. This one, when it gets cold, gets weak, but when it gets hot, it gets stronger, which means it is the complete opposite of the Mind Flayer, which is, I think, is meant to be very good foreshadowing of whatever they have made, whatever they have built is much stronger than we could ever comprehend, at least at this moment of time. We probably have underestimated them because Hopper and Elle have already broken in once and got out absolutely fine. So I do think they're going to be playing a significantly better, bigger part later on. That is something that's definitely on the table, and I think it's definitely something that we're meant to take focus on, because obviously the first time we see Dr. K, she's cutting into a heart. She's cutting into a heart, okay? Ew. But it also means that she has a much better understanding than we have. So that is something to be noting. We definitely then get a little bit of foreshadowing of the parents being overprotective, because we have both Hopper and Joyce are struggling with protecting their children, and by the end we actually understand they're going through a very similar arc, and I think that foreshadowing is in that scene with Hopper and Joyce together, because Joyce is saying, "I wish I could just wrap him up in bubble wrap," like, and Hopper's saying, "Well, yeah, well, Will could help too," but she's like, "No, I can't let him do that." It's very clearly setting up some parallels between Elle and Will. They've always been very, very intertwined in the narrative from season 1. They've always been like mistaken from each other, tied together, have their arcs together, both like the same guy. So I genuinely think it's really, really interesting to see how their arc is going to be even more intertwined after this. And I definitely can see them sharing this frustration that they're not being allowed to do anything, but probably less now, but it's still going to be simmering, I think. Because Will now has powers, and he's going to get very overconfident, I imagine. So we shall see what that goes. So we then do get the rooftop scene with Elle and Mike. But I don't think that scene was intended to be romantic. Now, let me describe to you why. They hug. No kiss. They hug. And Elle is doing a lot more of the hugging. Like, she's got her hands on Mike's head or on his back, whereas he's just hugging her quite normally, which is, I don't know, it's definitely, I think, an indication of that Elle loves Mike more than he loves her. That is the word. And I do definitely think it's something I'm very interested in seeing, because as well, they talk about the 3 waterfalls. Mike is like, we could run away like in one of our campaigns, and there's 3 waterfalls. Now I think those 3 waterfalls represent Mike. Oh, sorry, glitching. I think those 3 waterfalls represent Mike, they represent 11, and they represent Will. Now, for those of you who have seen BBC Merlin, there is a oh, it's really glitching, sorry. For those of you that have seen BBC Merlin, there is a scene where Arthur and Gwen are talking about running away, and they're like, oh, and Merlin will be there too. And that's definitely what it feels like, but in a much more subtle way. And thing is, Mike and Elle later on have a conversation talking about how the games don't end up like D&D, whatever it is. We haven't seen that yet, but we do know there's a conversation about how life isn't like D&D, and something that Mike is going to have to accept. And I do think this is foreshadowing the relationship doesn't work, because throughout this entire series, this whole series, and especially this episode, Mike is very heavily intertwined with D&D. So for Elle to reject that idea and change that perception, I definitely think that's going to be a big play for going forward, and definitely a massive thing for Byler. Speaking of Byler, we then get the hospital scene. Now, before we go into the obvious bit, the by the endgame bit, we are just going to discuss a little bit about Lucas and Will. So obviously we get a little bit of foreshadowing for the tape, which is really fun. So the tape is playing running up that hill, and it's immediately hinting that that's going to help later. Because when I saw it, I thought it was like a comfort thing, but knowing it actually helps is really, really interesting and something that I think we should definitely be exploring later. So, and then we also get Will being ignored. Now, it's definitely building up quite a bit because Will is getting very frustrated because people are going to start babying him just like season 2, and we really start to see that, especially later on when Joyce doesn't let him go to help the radio van. So after that, we have Rock and Robin, and we see the Rovicki scene, which is just freaking adorable, man. I don't know what else to say about that scene other than that it's just freaking adorable. It's so sweet. Funny enough, I also consider that more Byler evidence as well, because if they're not focusing on Robin and Vicky getting together, then they are leaving more space to focus on Will and Mike, especially as Will and Mike have the most solo scenes together by a month, and we haven't seen a single one. Not a single scene of just those two. Which is suspicious. But anyway, so obviously after we have the cuties, Will sees this and he focuses on the touches. Now, interestingly, this is also foreshadowing because we actually see Mike and Will touching a lot. Like, specifically in episode 4, when they're walking on the grass, they kind of gravitate to each other and bump into each other twice. It's interesting, and Will specifically focuses on the way that they are touching each other. And I think that is definitely a parallel that we will be seeing later. I think it's specifically something that we are meant to be taking notice of, and not just, oh, he's happy to learn other people are gay, because he probably is. But there's also more to it than that, because if it was just that he was happy that he was gay, they would just be showing us them kissing. They wouldn't be showing us specifically the hand motions and very specific details about it if he wasn't wishing them with Mike. You know? Yeah. So we then get and he runs away. His running away was absolutely hilarious. It's a very emotional scene, don't get me wrong. I recognize that, and I do think it was very emotional, but I do think the way he just get out the way as he goes down the court and gets called out for his bow cut later. It's so funny after that. It's really funny to me. We have the Dustin fight, and he's a great fighter. I will give him that. He's a great fighter. But I do think there is something a little bit. He needs to chill it. Just slightly. Not entirely, but he does need to relax a little bit, because he's now actively negatively affecting the group. The cruel mission is negatively affected, and there's a chance that, you know, it could have gone a lot smoother if Dustin was there instead of two people who have no idea what they are doing. Especially as it's Jonathan and Steve who are constantly fighting. I think it's really interesting that we need to find out where this line is of fighting for what you think is right, trying to stand up for what you think is right, like Eddie, or fighting to redeem him. Because you could redeem Eddie with Vecna, and you could redeem it with the monsters. There's a lot of ways he could actually redeem Eddie without just bringing more of a bad name to the Hellfire Club and fighting everyone. Because if we're being honest, that's not giving the best name to the Hellfire Club. By attacking everyone, by fighting everyone, by baiting everyone, there are better ways to go about it, I think. But Justin did hold his own, but that scene did make me cringe. Not in like, oh, that's so cringy. But it was specifically that I had trouble watching it because I was just like, I didn't want to see him get beat up. He got so beat up, he kept baiting them. It was pretty bad. It's something that comes up quite a few times, is that Will is getting very, very frustrated, and I think that's going to come to fruition in Volume 2 as well. Now he has powers, and he is unrestricted and safe in what he's doing. He is not going to let anyone slow him down, and that very much concerns me. I'm not quite sure, but I've written F-ass hair. Why have I written that? Whose hair have I insulted this much? It's like, it's all in capitals. I will show you guys. It's just... Oh, I remember. It's because when Steve's telling the cog, he's like, before, and I was like, dude, leave your hair alone. I did find that funny, though. That did at least make me feel more close to the original Steve. It made me have that more similar vibes. And then we have a second betrayal, because, again, Joyce isn't letting Will do anything, when in this scenario he was actually more helpful. Probably wouldn't have been in the long term, because he conks out. But I think in the situation, he could have been significantly more helpful in general. So again, just building up thematically this frustration from Will. Like, yes, he is upset at the end. Yes, he is hurt, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he is gone with the idea. And we see that because he has good ideas and he needs that space to grow up. He is so done being sick and defenseless the whole time it's being used, and now he finally has control back, and he is going to use that control. Then we get some parallels because Holly sees her parents fighting, and it definitely reminds me of Lonnie, and it reminds me of like Joyce and Lonnie fighting and Will and Jonathan listening in, except Holly had no one there in that moment. She didn't have Jonathan with her. She didn't have Mike or Nancy with her. She's in a significantly worse scenario because there's not much they can do about it. It's a really difficult situation. And it's just really interesting to see the children being paralleled to Will, because obviously Will was the first one to go missing, and he's the one that is going to be probably, you know, I think he's going to be very mentally struggling with this towards Volume 2 by the fact that they don't have them right away, because he's been going through this and now he knows that they're going to go through it too. So then we have the crawl mission. I don't have masses of things to say about this. It was just cool. I think it was really, really cool seeing how it worked. Seeing the fire burning the gate was very interesting, because does that mean, like, Vecna sealed the gate? It's... I don't know. The thing about it is weird. Like, Vecna doesn't want to be seen or reached, but then the military are just using the Upside Down. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. We also then have the Demogorgon jumping the van. That one I can only think is part of my theory that's obviously still ongoing now. The Vecna is purposely making Will see the POV of the Demogorgon attacking his friends and family to get into his brain. Because now Will has activated his power so he can attack them. But also, it's through the power of love, which is probably what Vecna didn't want. So I think it's very complicated. So, how Vecna knew Hobble was in there, or whether it was just a random Demogorgon attack, or it's just Vecna saying a general command like make sure you protect where we are. It's really interesting. Yeah, I quite like the humor in the crawl as well. I definitely feel like we're trying to retain some of that original humor. It does feel slightly clunky at times. I do think the first episode is ever so slightly disjointed in moments. Not all of them, but it's because there's so much going on in a very short space of time, and they're trying to establish a lot in a very short space of time, which I understand, but I think it can be slightly jarring at times, but I enjoyed it regardless. So, when Will taps into the hive mind, I also love the foreshadowing of the lights going, because everyone who has watched season 1 is likely seeing that and thinking, wait a minute, the light's flickering, it should be a Demogorgon. If it's not a Demogorgon, then it was Will, because somehow he's connecting to Vecna's powers. And obviously this pays off later, but I'm also not sure it's paying off in a good way, because Will collapses in the scene, and he's obviously like, he is devastated. He's clinging to his mum, and he does that a lot this season because it's terrifying what he's seeing. And he might even be afraid of what he's becoming. Because, you know, who wants to be going through this? Who wants to be seeing their family and friends killed like this? So something definitely a flip switches in Will's brain here. And I do think that he is starting to get more control. Obviously more at the end, but I think it's our first sign that, hey, something's up with Will here. Yeah, we do get the terrified Will. And poor Holly. Poor Holly. We know how Will has gone now, because he was grabbed in the very same way that Holly was very likely grabbed. It's a direct confirmation. And I think that bond between Holly and Will might be a bit stronger later on, because obviously, you know, he's been through the same thing. I do think there could be some connection there. Although Escape from Camelot is episode 7, so it is quite soon. No, quite late, sorry. So we'll see. But overall, I know I've been a little bit negative, but I really loved it. I do think we got some decent Byler proof overall, although I think the later episodes are definitely more heavy Byler proof. And I know a lot of you are probably worried right now and thinking a lot of this stuff isn't Byler proof, especially episode 4. I have posted a short disproving the Robin one, because that's not what you guys are probably thinking. And yeah, I would say just have hope, my friends. We're in a moment of tragedy, because if you look how many My 11s are flipping over now, so many people who don't ship Byler are frustrated by the fact they think it's becoming canon. So I would say have hope, don't have Byler doubt, and everything is going to be okay. You are Ryuin verified that everything is going to be okay, and we are going to see our Bylers on stage. I predicted so much of this right, and I predicted this right too, I promise you. So yes, I think any final thoughts on the episode? I think it was a good start though. I definitely think it was a great start to the season. It really brings us back into the world. I do think it sacrifices a little bit of character dynamics. Like, Jonathan and Steve, I do feel like their characters were incredibly watered down, and I do think they were done dirty, and I'm hoping in Volume 2 this improves, because I used to love Steve Harrington, and now I don't. I used to quite like Jonathan after Season 1, now I don't. I can't stand either of them because it's played off as a joke, but they're just fighting over Nancy, which is a plotline should have been gone ages ago. The characters are all revolving around Nancy, and it frustrates me. It frustrates me. I love Will. I love Will taking the limelight. Will is my favorite character. I love him so much. Good to see him finally stepping up and you really getting this main character energy this time. It's foreshadowing the rest of the season, but yeah, it was a very exciting episode. I would say I loved it. If you guys have any questions in the comments, please do let me know. The episode only came out yesterday. No, literally today, I think, at the time of filming. So I am working with what I have. If there's more stuff that comes out, please feel free to notify me. Any like hidden details I saw. But next week we're going to be joined by a very special guest. I won't tell you why. And on Wednesday I've got something really, really cool planned. I won't spoil what we're doing, but I have a lot of content lined up. I am going to help us through this 1 month wait because I need their help too. It's going to be a long month. Anyway. Catch you later. Bye bye. And remember, the lion does not concern itself with Byler doubt.